What is a massive red flag about a new workplace? Seconding the lack of training. That's a major thing to be concerned about, and it's definitely a contributor to high turnover. I was hired as a dispatcher for a local police department years ago. I was like 22, and they threw me on answering 911 calls on day one of the job. They gave me no instructions on what I was supposed to say, do, or ask. I was so flustered trying to take emergency calls and dispatch units accordingly. One of the calls I accidentally hung up on because I was so nervous. I had no idea what I was doing. And the guy who was quote unquote training me just wandered around the station talking to people while I was left clueless and yelling for him to come answer my questions and help me. What a freaking waste. I left my job of 4 years and took a pay cut to give myself a better opportunity. I said screw it and didn't show up at the end of the week. I assumed the accidental hang-up call was immediately transferred to the trainer of the year who was busy discussing last night's game. Story 2. The look of defeat on the faces of their employees. When the place is good to work, their employees seem to be excited to be there. There are smiles, there are jokes, and there is enthusiasm. When a company screws over and mistreats their employees, the employees get that look of defeat in their eyes. Their job has no enjoyment, it is merely about survival. And when I say survival, I don't mean working to make some money to get food to eat. I mean that you're trying to make it to the end of the day, just to go home and repeat the cycle, and each day a bit worse than the next. People don't joke, and if they do, it seems to be morbid jokes about the workplace. People aren't social, you can feel the lack of joy. The company has managed to defeat their workforce. Story 3. I got started in HVAC last spring, and a month before tech school graduation, I went to every HVAC company in my area and handed in my resume. I had 4 interviews, my current employer was my third. He gave me the job offer, but then I told him I had an interview somewhere else shortly after this one, and I wanted to see how it went. After I said that, he gave me some really good advice. He says, that's good, that's great. Interview at as many places as you can. You need to find a place that fits you and your expectations. If that isn't here, then I wish you luck. Just remember, not only are they interviewing you, but you should be interviewing them. After he said that, I pretty much had my mind made up. This small company actually gives a crap. Story 4. The person interviewing you doesn't seem to have any idea who you are. I don't mean your name, I mean the stuff in your CV and your application. If they don't know who you are, that means they don't care who you are. They just want a warm body for as long as they can have you. Also, an overly complicated bonus schedule based on a large number of metrics. That's a sign of a company that will be doing everything they can to screw you out of bonuses while simultaneously using the promise of future bonuses to retain people. I can guarantee you that at least 2 of those metrics are all but impossible to hit simultaneously. Story 5. A lot of people telling you who you can trust and distrust and asking your opinions on people you just met. They make it seem like they're just befriending the new person, but really they're trying to draw you into their side of the company's factions, or gauge if they should bring you into their faction, and then get some dirt on you to turn others against you, if need be. That's not to say there's something you can do once you see those red flags, except go ahead and figure out how to get out with as little damage as possible. Story 6. Like others have said, high turnover rate. Also, disagreements on procedure. If the book says one way, the manager tells you to do another, and a coworker suggests differently on all the same situation, that's a red flag, especially in retail. I like working somewhere where there's consistency in rules and how things are done, mostly because I don't want to look dumb doing it the quote-unquote wrong way for the same situation another time. Story 7. Being hired for a specific job and then having additional duties tacked on after you are hired. The company doesn't follow its own employee handbook or whatever rules and guidelines they have. Work hours and days changed after you are hired, telling you which holidays you have off, then not giving you those holidays off. Every employee is talking trash about every other employee. Poor or non-existent training time. Management with no management training or knowledge. Story 8. I started a new career last spring, and a month before graduation, I Googled all of the companies in my area related to the field and brought them my resume in person. This one particular company gave me a job offer without even looking at the resume and only asking a couple of questions. It went something like this. So, you're getting ready to graduate? He glances at the resume. Okay, I'm going to hire you. Where are you working now? I'm working at X. All right, I want you to start immediately. Can you come in at 6 a.m. tomorrow? Well, no, I've got to put in my 2 weeks. So, you can't start tomorrow? That's fine. I don't even do the hiring. That's what Karen does, but she'll be gone for a few days. We usually start people at X dollars an hour, but I can probably get you going at something higher. How's X dollars an hour sound? Not sure. I've had better offers from a couple other places that called me back. Well, that's okay too. You can discuss that with Karen. She takes care of wages. I just really need someone to start immediately. I had a guy walk out last week and my own son quit this morning. Right there is when my gut instinct went into overdrive and I got out as soon as I could. Story 9. When you arrive on your first day and there are a lot of recently vacated desks, or if there are a lot of junior people recently promoted to senior positions that seem a little beyond their reach. At my last job, this happened. Got there, my manager generously let me pick out any desk I wanted because we recently had several people leave and I could choose from any of those desks. Several of the people I was supposed to be working with directly, and I made sure to screen for competency before accepting the offer, had left, so they then introduced me to the people who would be replacing them and were way more junior. Story 10. If your non-manager coworkers are always looking for a way out of working, it's time to get the heck out ASAP, especially if they know that their absence will screw you over on a large scale. When I worked at Goodwill, we had 2 people who were in school for better jobs and several others who were always talking about bogus excuses to not come to work. A constant talk of upcoming job interviews and them just outright leaving in the middle of their shift from feeling sick. They'd walk around as if they are sick, then when they get the go-ahead to leave, they speed walk out the door with a ton of energy they weren't producing before while saying bye to everyone they pass on the way out with a big smile on their faces. Story 11. If your future manager insults the team in any way, run. I once interviewed a manager who made 2 very brief quote-unquote jokes with a bitter edge implying her current team was incompetent and lazy. It gave me pause, but I brushed it aside as, well, of course, I'll be awesome, and I took the job. It only took me 1 week for me to see she cruelly scolded her entire team and other staff on a daily basis, and within 2 weeks I was enjoying the same treatment. That job ended my mental health. I'm never ignoring those screaming red flags again. Story 12. They have literally everything in the building. I interviewed at a place where they had a cafeteria and a nurse's station, not healthcare related, in the building. I was pretty desperate for a job, so I overlooked this, but was glad they didn't call me back. They didn't allow missed days, and I was told by one of the ladies who let me listen in on her phones that she had missed a day of work, so she didn't get any sort of raise that year. If you're sick, they expect you to be there and doing the job. Worst case scenario, you need to visit their nurse. Story 13. Definitely heed the warnings on turnover rate. Another important thing to look out for is management of client work and of employees. If a company is more concerned about getting something done than the sanity/personal well-being of employees, you'll probably be miserable. Some places will try to sell horrible hours as dedication and hard work, but it might also mean they don't care about your personal life so long as they get their projects done. Sure, some fields are just like that, but if you can't see yourself handling that, don't start. Story 14. Treating you like a child, i.e. monitoring the time you arrive and leave, timing your breaks, bathroom visits, dress codes that don't make sense for your role, and any other rules that make more sense for a kid than an adult. If you're an experienced professional in any office setting, you should be basically left to take care of yourself as long as your work is getting done. Obviously, these rules make more sense for jobs where you need to schedule breaks around other people, or service jobs, or jobs with lots of people with little experience, but still, I hear stories of places that give people warnings for being a minute late. Story 15. They screw up your orientation or begin inconveniencing you before you've even officially started. I showed up for orientation at the corner of Happy and Healthy only to be greeted by the store manager, who cheerfully informed me that there's some glitch with my name in the system and I'd have to come back the next day. It was because during the application process, I'd placed a period after my middle initial. So not only did they know this was a common issue that I could fix from home, they let me drive 12 miles instead of just calling me and telling me. I gave it a shot anyways and proceeded to get scheduled 10 hours a week after being assured I'd at least get 28. And at $1 less an hour than what was promised. Got the baptized by fire treatment and was treated like a huge inconvenience when I had a question. They tossed me on pharmacy drive-thru with next to no training. Got called on almost every one of my days off, and despite needing the hours, it was still annoying that they expected me to come in at the drop of a hat. Christmas Eve with my family, they were calling me, wanting me in. Sitting on the couch heartbroken because I just had my dog terminated. Frickin' Walgreens calling me. They got mad when I quit without notice after getting a job that paid $6 an hour more. Story 16. An old friend of mine worked for a certain coffee shop chain. One day, he had terrible food poisoning and wasn't at all fit to work. When his dad called him in sick, the manager threatened to write him up. Needless to say, he quit not long after. When I interviewed at that same location, they had to reschedule my interview because the manager had a personal emergency and had to leave. I can kinda understand, but a phone call would have been nice. When I interviewed at a different location, the same thing happened twice. Then when I told them I was 17, they immediately turned me away despite my birthday being on my application. I love the food and coffee there, but oh my god, their management is just atrocious. Story 17. When I first started at my job before the one I'm working now, I saw tons of very talented, smart, qualified individuals working in roles that they excelled at. Normally, you would think that this would be a good indication of a great hiring system and application process. The longer I worked there, the longer those same people stayed right where they were when I was first hired. At first, I just thought they liked what they were doing, as these people always were very kind and helpful to me, which I appreciated because I was so new and the job really was a lot to learn. Then as time went on and I got more comfortable in my role, those same people also stayed in their roles. Maybe they just have a long time frame before you can be promoted, or so I thought. Then a few people were promoted, but it wasn't the people you'd think it should have been. Many of them were people who refused to help us newbies out. A lot of them were people I'd hardly spoken to or straight up didn't know who they were or that they ever worked there. People who seem to deserve promotions who stay in their roles isn't always a bad sign. But when 95% of the promotions are people your entire department feels shouldn't be promoted, it is a sign of a bad workplace. Shortly after those promotions, a lot of people left. Upper management also changed, new policies were put into place that didn't make sense for the work we were doing. Beloved managers were let go. I left shortly after being told for several weeks that I would be promoted, seeing other, less qualified individuals being promoted ahead of me, and then being told I would be part of a quote-unquote new department, which would entail less work than I was currently doing, a demotion. People being highly qualified in their roles isn't always a sign of a bad workplace, but if you look for other indicators, like why so many people seem to excel in their roles but never move up, you can definitely see that it's often an indicator of a workplace that doesn't value loyal and hardworking employees. Story 18. I was recently duped into thinking I had a sales job. I realized it was MLM during the interview process, but they were vague enough to fool me into thinking it was salaried. I came in for my first day and started to notice things. There's a flat screen TV on the wall playing some game show I've never heard of, tons of lost-looking people in the lobby staring at the TV, an Xbox was plugged in but dangling from the TV, clearly never used. The receptionist sat behind a haggard and hastily constructed desk. It looked like it was intentionally designed to look like a reclaimed wood project, but when I went behind it to type some info on a laptop, it was actually very poorly constructed and hiding quite the mess behind. Oh, and the laptop belonged to someone else, not the office, and the receptionist was trying to track them down for the charger. I had to enter my info twice because they had went out in the interim. Eventually, someone collected 3 of us and started to tour the office. It was a kitchenette which was visible from the waiting room, 2 bathrooms, and 2 offices with windows to the street. There was a little secondary seating area for eating. Then things got weird. This is when I first noticed nobody who worked there was smiling unless they thought people were looking at them. Toward the back are 4 windowless offices. The ones with open doors are absolutely bare bones. They're all shared as well, with 3 people crammed around a desk in one room. The door at the end of the hallway has, in bold block text lettering, "Don't look back, you're not going that way." I'd seen plenty of red flags already, but I really needed a job. Figured, hey, I'm supposed to be selling Verizon Fios, no initial investment on my end, how sketchy could it be? The door opens and out walks 3 people carrying cases of cosmetics. Alright, what the heck? In this back room is a large open space. In the back room is a room with cubbies, like you had in kindergarten. These get cleaned out and donated every Friday, so make sure you don't leave anything. Is that a high turnover rate I smell? There were 6 whiteboards with a different person giving a different presentation on each. They were all sharing one eraser, and my presenter got halfway through her sales pitch lesson before she got a working dry erase marker. So you don't provide your employees with the tools they need. Okay, great. Why is there a gong hanging from the ceiling? I actually said, is anyone seeing a bunch of red flags right now? While the presenter was looking for a marker. We get through that, and the second person who interviewed me pops up out of nowhere and has me write down and rehearse the pitch with him. It is super awkward with his fake smiling, fake enthusiasm, and general attitude. We do this 6 times each, then it's time for a daily meeting. Hey guys, callback. Hey guys. Great, callbacks. I'm not down with this. Some guy reads an article about some BS school program that made students sell children's dictionaries as coursework. Basically sold the job as being paid while attending school. He was a great public speaker. If I hadn't noticed the commission numbers being off, I might have come back for day 2. He claims they're going up from $80 something per sale to $120 something per sale for internet only. Wait, I've been consistently hearing $300 per sale, so what else have I been misled about? He goes on to highlight quote-unquote top sellers and other percentage stuff that they encourage. Let me get a hell yeah for X 3 sales yesterday. Callback, hell yeah. Also, the acronym JUICE, J-U-I-C-E, was said and called back a lot. At one point, he straight up said, "We encourage you to lie, cheat, and steal to get ahead," and that's when I was like 110% done. I was planning on sticking around to see the paperwork in hopes I could catch something just straight up illegal, but they sent me and one other well-spoken dude home and said to come back tomorrow to finish orientation and take the Verizon training program. Obviously, I did not return for day 2. This happened last Thursday. I still feel really freaking stupid that I even lasted that long, clinging to any shred of hope I could find. I'm trying to tell myself that they fool people for a living and I only gave them 4 hours of my time, but even that is more than the parasites deserved. Story 19. Really bad glassdoor reviews, not typical ones, but ones where people write whole essays on how much they hated the job. The employee handbook has a line about agreeing to anything they ask of you even if it wasn't in your job description. You are left alone for hours at a time with nothing to do, but you are still expected to be busy. You're not allowed to go to the bathroom without telling your boss. On top of that, you're not allowed to do things like get coffee or water without it being frowned upon by management. You are asked to volunteer at any time, aka work for free, even if it's for a good cause. Your coworkers are completely clueless about what's going on at any time. Every day when you come in, your work from the previous day is discarded or forgotten about until several weeks later when you are asked why you haven't finished X thing. You are constantly expected to redo work over and over with pointless or stupid changes until ultimately you put it back the way it was before, or the final product is so horrible that you don't even want to be associated with it. Hardly anything is ever accomplished or finished. Your coworkers ever get fired without warning. Your boss yells and screams at you or anyone else or humiliates someone publicly to the point that they cry. Story 20. Constantly telling you that they don't, quote, have the required information to write your contract. I worked 22 days in a cleaning company once and it started off pretty smooth. I was told that since I was hired on the spot, the paperwork would take a while. Okay, understandable. I was given contact info where to send all my info like name, address, bank account number, etc. I sent everything out on the first day, yet during week 3, I still had not received my contract. Only after I called up the boss of my boss was I given an explanation. My boss never sent my info further and my work hours were also missing information. I and the store manager, who was not part of the company, just someone whose store I was cleaning, were the only people who knew how much I worked. I cleaned before the store opened, so from 6 to 8 a.m. It's been 2 months since I quit and I never got my paycheck. I did get a sweet handwritten apology though, as if that helps a student. Story 21. Christian company. God shouldn't be a selling point for their clients or employees. Most of the time, it's BS to seem like they're going to treat you right or have some values. Instead, they will use it to excuse pushy chaplains as their HR reps and several fundy, obnoxious employees who drank the Kool-Aid. Subtle religious stuff is fine, but it shouldn't be, hi, we are X company, we're a Christian company that does Y. The last company that did this used $15,000 to put up some crappy-looking painted metal boxes with Bible verses on them. I wouldn't doubt that it cost them $250 and that the CEO's nice Audi was just a gift from Jeeves. Also, personal bias perhaps, but fat upper management, I mean obese, not just hefty. Something about the CFO at my last job just stank with, I indulge myself at every opportunity, when they were so gracious as to pay us a few dollars above minimum wage and ensured no one felt overworked by being full-time. And if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 22. Hey bro, I'm making less money than before and I still could not be happier. Don't sell yourself short. You deserve to work and be happy even if it's not what you thought you'd be doing. I implore you to find anything else and get that job lined up and just leave that bad job behind. It isn't worth it to stay. I work as a cashier now in a little country store in the tiny town I live in and it's so much better for me. Yes, pay is small, but my bosses, a married couple, actually care about me. They listen to me, they teach me when I screw up without being condescending. They gave me a Christmas bonus when I'd been there for a meager 2 months with a handwritten card in the envelope. When I had a migraine last week, they said I could go home if I needed to, no judgment. I didn't think bosses like this could exist. The atmosphere is happy boredom, stocking shelves between customers. Sometimes happiness is simplicity. So please find yourself a new job. You don't have to be unhappy. I wish you all the best. Story 23. Something my dad always used and I found to be true is to look at the vehicles in the parking lot. If you see a good number of newer, souped-up vehicles, then more than likely there are a lot of long-time employees working there, comfortable enough with the company to pay cash outright or make a huge financial decision. If you drive up and see a bunch of crap-box Hondas and rusted-up trucks, or see people constantly getting dropped off or picked up by someone else, 9 out of 10, the turnover rate is super high and they are grabbing for anyone to work for them, felons and the like. It helped me out so far and has always rung true. Story 24. I worked at a place where the guy training me wouldn't share any special tips or tricks. He gave the base training and anything else I had to figure out myself. I worked extra one night and a third shift manager showed me some magic and shortcuts. The whole place was like this. Everybody hoarded their skills. Anything you said or did spread throughout the plant. It was a rumor mill with backstabbing and pitting production against the Q&A lab. Because of my skill set being an IT guy that could also get dirty in the production area, they called me a unicorn and praised me, then constantly threatened to let me go, then back to slapping me on the back the next week. 12, 16-hour days and no crap, 7 days a week sometimes. I've never worked in a more toxic environment before, or thankfully, since. I said something like that at a place a few years later. I told the manager I'd worked in a toxic environment before and wouldn't again. He put his head on his desk and asked if I would at least stay past lunch, and I promised I would. I'll never forget how grateful he looked when I actually came back, but that put the nail in the coffin for me and I put in notice that night. Story 25. When they require a 2-week notice for days that you need off, but once you place a request, they say there is no guarantee. Insult to injury is when they schedule you on the day anyway with no reason as to why. They have a lot of people they can call in to cover. My favorite is when my boss does this and then complains that he scheduled too many people. I drew the line on Christmas Day. I requested the day all the way back in October so that I could make the trip over to my mom's house and celebrate with her. Unsurprisingly, I was scheduled for the day. I waited until 1 a.m. to call off so that he had no time to find anyone for my opening shift. Story 26. The entire multi-story IT building is made entirely of glass except the outside walls. Seriously, every single surface is glass? On my first day on the job, I discovered that I was accidentally reading a performance review from a meeting room across the way, and my eyes had just drifted from the HR overview. There is no privacy anywhere, and yeah, the gaps in the stalls are definitely there. Then there is the fact that every single person uses the exact same laptop, regardless of function, and every workstation is identical. No personals anywhere. We are just a step away from floating or hot seating or whatever it is nowadays. Now they are etching privacy art on some of the conference room walls for those rare cases where privacy really is necessary. It truly looks and feels inspired from an episode of Black Mirror. You can imagine the laptop configurations. And for those of you in software development, you'll be happy to know that all functions of the company now use Scrum, IT or not. The entirety of the company operates on 2-week sprints. I don't know if there is a more perfect purgatory for a software developer. Story 27. Interviewer. So, can you start tomorrow? Me? No, I'll have to give 2 weeks notice. Interviewer. Do you think they'd be flexible about that? Me? I could ask, but... Interviewer. Because we really need someone to start as soon as possible. These two guys interviewing me had clearly not read my resume in any detail and were so desperate to bring someone in that they were ready to hire me on the spot, even though I wasn't qualified and not at all enthusiastic about the job. Story 28. A massive gap between the employees. If there's only a handful of 40 plus and the rest are all under 25, then you're in a workplace that clearly can't keep employees. All those 40 pluses probably are cool with whatever BS since they don't really care or are just doing it for something to do instead of retiring. And the other 25s are there for short periods of time or are so young that they don't know how terrible the place is. Clearly, this means that nobody wants to work there for a long time or career because other places are better. Story 29. An accounts director just left, followed by the senior IT manager and the other IT staff. Then you got hired on a huge wage and told to start fresh. It turns out the accounts director was embezzling company funds and skipped out before getting caught. The IT guys read his emails after he left and then jump ship. The company starts a slow spiral into collapse, starting with an all-employees everything is wonderful meeting, recruiting a new IT guy, you, to keep the company limping along, and potentially shift the blame onto you to get breathing space. So yeah, this happened to me in 1999. I was given the heads up by a friend of mine, so I bugged the boardroom with an old Nokia on silent auto answer. I bailed 20 minutes after the first paycheck hit my bank account. I still had to attend and defend in court. No real stress though. Story 30. High turnover rates, and I don't mean just for entry-level jobs, I mean all up and down the corporate ladder. If even the C-suite can't keep people, that's a bad sign. Corporate brainwashing, if you're being spoon-fed your mission or value statement ad nauseum, run away. Just trust me on this, they're looking for slaves, not talent. Paring down essential positions. No one should be doing the job of 10 people. No one. It's not sustainable, and corporations don't care about you or your loyalty. The politics of favoritism. You'll know it when you see it. You're going to find it to some extent everywhere, but it shouldn't be at the cost of everyone else's finances or mental stability. Either everyone or no one is swayed by write-ups. They're either doling them out like candy or with an iron fist. Story 31. My boss asked if I plan to have kids, being told I'm not allowed to sit in the main office and that I'll be in the trailer a couple of 100 feet away. Having to clean the trailer because the cleaning ladies won't go over there. The roach is in my office. I don't like drama, which is why I don't like those girls. It turns out my boss is the drama. The lack of communication on holidays off. I drove in yesterday, as I was told to. The gates were locked and no one was there. Called my boss and he told me to go home. On Friday, the owner told the people in the main office to leave at 4, but no one told me. Story 32. At my incredibly toxic former office, we had very high turnover, which is not surprising since all of those who left would be crying or incredibly stressed out and full of self-doubt and calling me upset if not daily then at least once a week until they quit. There were unreasonable timelines and lack of communication of expectations, or constantly changing their minds and then being upset you can't anticipate the changes. Gossiping and bad-mouthing you the moment you leave the room, and finally when the boss repeatedly talks about how great they are and how no one else would take the time to teach you these things or say passive-aggressive things like, well, you're going to do what you want anyways, why listen to me, your boss? And my repeated favorite? Sure, no one said good morning to me, it's not like I'm your boss or anything, when not enough people said good morning to them when they walked in. Story 33. I worked for a medical office. I only stayed for 2 years. During my 2 years there, I saw 54 employees come and go. If that's not a high turnover rate, I don't know what is. Mind you, it was a fairly small but very busy practice. No proper training. The office manager would go out and get her hair done on the clock, yet we were not given a lunch, and it was frowned upon for us to eat conservatively at our desks. No raises were ever given from the time I started until the time I left. And how dare you call out if you were severely ill? Well, you work at a doctor's office, come in and have someone take a look at you. Worst job ever. Story 34. Run away fast if you notice labor laws being casually broken, like your breaks are often cut short, sporadic, and or non-existent. I worked for a popular doggy daycare chain location. Shifts were 7 to 8 hours long, and employees were given one 15-minute break and one 5-minute break. My first break was often cut to 10 minutes because the area aside for employees was also used for client training, and the office area for management. Absolute nightmare. Additionally, I only got paid $7.25 an hour. Minimum wage is $8.25 for jobs without tips. Since I was new, tips were withheld for the first 3 months, but your wage is supposed to be altered accordingly until you can get said tips. The raise after the probation period was 50 cents. I was fuming and quit within a week of the raise. Story 35. I had an employer hire me to work in his family's grocery store, mainly because he was friends with my dad, when I was 17, and it was going to be my first job. I turned in the application, and he said since my dad was his friend, he'd interview me. I asked when the interview was. He said, whenever you want to come in for one is fine. So I told him, okay, let's have it tomorrow morning. So we did the interview and he told me I was hired. I asked when I should come in for my first day. He said, well, I'm usually only here until 2 p.m., but you can just come in and start whenever you want. It doesn't matter. AKA, please don't come while I'm here. I don't want to have to train you. I showed up the following Saturday at 9 a.m. and he said an assistant manager would be training me. She sat me in the back room with a super outdated TV and VCR and made me watch VHS tapes. When the first tape ended, I asked her what she wanted me to do. She told me to switch to a different tape. I asked which one. She said it didn't matter. I looked and looked. She'd only given me one tape. I let her know. She said she'd bring a new one and until then fill out the worksheets they'd left for me. I finished the worksheets in, I want to say, about an hour, and she never brought the tape, so I decided to go get it myself, thinking maybe it was busy up front. Nope, she left. She was supposed to be training me, and she just left. I went to the employer and asked what he wanted me to do. He said, well, she doesn't work again until Wednesday, so if you want to come back then, it would be best. I never went back, and the store shut down shortly after that. Story 36. Having spent most of my career in nonprofits, one of the first things I do when researching an organization to apply to is check their 990 form for the last 3 years. I was about to apply for a job with a local charitable foundation since foundation jobs are usually very stable, better paying, and actually offer growth potential. Then I saw the data. They have 16 employees, 5 of which are C-level. 3 of those have made-up or redundant titles. Those 5 employees earn collectively over 60% of the money spent on wages. Upon further review of their employee directory, I learned that they only have 2 mid-level management roles and the other 9 employees have associate titles. That kind of top-heavy disparity is not a stable business model in the nonprofit world. I was also able to track down their charitable spending versus donation rate, and it's one of the worst in the country. If you're interested in charity or nonprofit work, always look at the 990 before applying. Sometimes it's not worth your time to get involved in an organization like this. Story 37. I recently turned down a new job for several reasons, so not solely limited to red flags, but I did get one. This job was advertised through a recruiting agency. In every other scenario I can think of, the hiring manager communicates via the recruiter. In this case, the manager had my number as he initially wanted a phone interview with me prior to me coming in for the interview proper. After the second interview, the recruiter asked for my references as they wanted to proceed. Now, I had already decided I didn't want the job as they told me flat out it was very stressful, main regional hospital with 24/7, 365 operations. So anyway, the manager texted me directly at 10 p.m. one night that he was held up in meetings all day, but that he would get onto calling my references the next day. I thought this was odd and also an inconsiderate time to be texting me. The following night, he texted me at 11 p.m. to say he had only gotten hold of one of my references, but would call the next one the following day. I thought to myself, he's texting me at all hours and I don't even work for him yet. When it came to the crunch, I decided I didn't want the job. He then called me again the next day to ask me why I didn't take it. I almost said, "This is why." The only other example I can give is when I was offered a ridiculously high hourly rate for a 4-month contract. I was suspicious and asked a friend who had worked there. He said they'll work you like a slave for 3 weeks and fire you. Lucky escape. Story 38. HR is larger than 1/20th the force. That's usually a sign that they get sued a lot and have a very strict, unwritten internal behavior speech code that you will accidentally trip over. The reason it's a red flag is that you need many people to administer such an enormous amount of control. A good company hires good lawyers to defend them. A bad company just balloons HR. They end up losing more money as a fired employee can still sue, and a bad lawyer will still lose. Story 39. I once went to an interview. I was there on time. They were not. I waited in the hall 30 minutes just so the interviewer could come and tell me they're late, and then they will be with me soon. I told her on the spot, "I'm sorry, but I have things to do. I've been waiting cluelessly here. We will either have to reschedule an interview or let it go." They called me the next week to reschedule, but I thought about it. How would they have treated me if I was late to the interview? So I told them I was not interested anymore. Also, on the phone interview before, I asked them about social advantages, insurance, and the like. She was not able to give me a concrete answer and just told me a generic, "They're good, that's all I know." That's another red flag. Story 40. Having to sign a form stating that any intellectual property you develop during the course of your employment belongs to the company. I'm a writer who takes side jobs when my creativity dips. Had an employer in the business of wire harness manufacturing who tried to literally sue me for the profits of a fictional ebook I published during my employment, which earned less in 3 months of sales than I made as a weekly wage. Luckily, the judge basically laughed at them for suing for a few $100s and I won reimbursement of court costs. But according to the letter of the law, they were entirely in the right. I'm not a terribly productive or popular writer, not enough to make a full-time career of it anyway, but what I create has personal meaning to me. I'm not sure what degree of rage would have been awakened if I had lost that case, but I'm glad that I didn't have to forfeit a chunk of my soul to some schmuck company. For those curious, Unlimited Services was the employer. Story 41. We're a company with values. All of our employees have high ethical standards. High likelihood that the company is going to be up your butt about what you do off the clock. Too many people in the company are related or married to each other. At best, they bring their personal stuff into the workplace. At worst, their familial loyalties get in the way of actually running the place and make it impossible to address any inefficiencies or problems. Draconian enforcement of dress code or tardiness policies in workplaces where those things aren't extremely important to the nature of the job. This is a place that doesn't get that life happens sometimes and will probably be inflexible and frustrating as a whole. Conversely, workplaces that don't enforce those policies at all, that's a red flag for a place where you keep getting in trouble because you can't get your work done because you're waiting on the people who know they can sleep off their hangover because the boss is too captivated by the delusion of a quote-unquote flexible workplace. The company has no formal process for reviewing your performance. You'll be coasting along thinking you're doing okay because you get no feedback, positive or negative. Then they hit you with a bunch of gripes when they feel vindictive. Story 42. If your boss is already criticizing your performance in your first week at a new job, I can't think of a bigger red flag. Even if your boss is nice about it, i.e., just letting you know you have to get better or I'll be forced to write you up, this is still a major red flag to me. Regardless of the job, you should be given at least a full month to get used to everything and be allowed to make several errors. As soon as your boss starts pressuring you, it will cause major anxiety and depression. Story 43. I just avoided a job with the work hard, play hard mindset. They had things like a gym on site, a games room, early leave on a Friday/late start on a Monday, exercise classes during lunch, etc., and it just screamed, "We're going to overwork you to death and you're not allowed to complain about it because we've offered you all of this stuff. Oh, and if we see you actually using this stuff, you're fired because you should be working." On the phone call after applying, it rang enough alarm bells that I asked what the work-life balance was like. Would they expect me to work over the hours? Would I be called in on the weekends? And I was met with about 5 seconds of silence. Then, well, we work until the job is done. It was a marketing job. The job is never done. I now always go for the adverts that are just, we'll pay you X amount of money, you get X amount of holidays and a pension. Because that says to me, come in at the assigned time, work until the assigned time, and when you leave, forget about your job until you've got to come back. Story 44. If they make you do one of those stupid personality tests in your interview on your first day to see how you quote unquote fit in, it will come back to bite you no matter how you answer, and you'll end up being pigeonholed by it. A job I had a few years ago made me do one and said they were thrilled about the difference between my personality and that of all my coworkers, and that they needed someone like me around to keep everyone balanced. When I was being fired 5 months later, they cited that same personality test as one of the reasons it just wasn't working out. Total BS. Story 45. On my first day, my first hour, I was pulled aside and told who not to speak to, what people to be aware of when saying anything particularly not work-related, and who not to create a fuss over regardless of the way they act or what they say. I'd never had this with a private company before. I've had it sometimes with public services because some people think they can do or say things without being fired. I was freelancing, so I didn't really give that much of a crap about it, even if some of the warnings were about managers who despise freelancers. I just wanted to do my job well, and if it meant stirring these people up, I would. But they also said the same thing to a permanent employee who started on the same day. I did everything I could to finish that gig quickly and left. I was offered more work, but the office environment was so toxic I lied to leave early, and I also lied that I was unavailable when they wanted me to come back a few months later. And if any of these stories got to you too, here's more for you. YouTube thinks we're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.